Hello, everybody. How are you holding up? I really do hope that you are good and safe at the same time. And of course, you are still with me and hindi kayo nagsasawa na panoorin itong ating mga video lessons because the reason why I'm doing this is for you guys, para maging equipped kayo, para may matutunan kayo. Okay? So, let's start. Okay, so in this session, we're going to discover photosynthesis, an overview of it. Ano nga ba yung process na ito? Why is this important? Why is this very significant at the same time? Bakit kailangan nating pag-aralan ito? Okay? Kasi someday, somehow, merong magtatanong sa inyo kung bakit nga ba at paano gumagawa ng sariling pagkain itong ating mga plants. At the same time, bakit siya importante sa atin? So here in the figure, you can see and when able to, read this question, how can sunlight, di ba? As you can see here, yung ating visible spectrum, yung electromagnetic spectrum natin na nakita natin sa rainbow, yung Roy G. Biv, power the synthesis of organic substances. When we say organic substances, ito yung mga product ng photosynthesis. So, paano nga ba from this energy, we can able or plants can able to produce its own food. Let's explore. But first, let me present to you our target, our objective for this lesson. So at the end of this lesson, you are expected to explain what happens during the light-dependent reaction and light-independent reaction, or the so-called Calvin cycle, and describe the patterns of electron flow through light reaction events. So, we're going to discover ano nga ba ito tinatawag ng mga light-dependent and light-independent reaction that happens during the process of photosynthesis. To start with, we all know that life on Earth is powered by the energy provided by the sun. The chloroplast in plants and that of other producers capture light energy that traveled around 150 million kilometers from the sun and then convert it to chemical energy stored in sugar molecules. This conversion is called photosynthesis. This process nourishes almost the entire living world directly or indirectly. Autotrophs or organisms that are self-feeders. Auto kasi means self, while tropos means feeder. They sustain themselves without eating anything derived from other living things. They produce their organic molecules from carbon dioxide and other inorganic raw materials from the environment. They are the ultimate source of organic compounds for all non-autotrophic organisms like us human beings. All plants are autotrophs, and the only nutrients they require are water and minerals from the soil and also carbon dioxide from the air. Plants are specifically classified as photoautotrophs since they use light as a source of energy to synthesize organic substances. Some autotrophs may somehow are classified as chemoautotrophs kasi na-harvest nila yung energy nila from oxidizing inorganic substances like sulfur and ammonia. While heterotrophs are unable to make their own food. So like us, we depend on other compounds produced by other organisms. Heterotrophs are basically our biosphere's consumers. Almost all heterotrophs, including human beings, are completely dependent directly or indirectly on photoautotrophs for food. Let me ask you, aside from bryophytes and other plants, can you name other photosynthetic organisms? If you know, please make use of our comment section. You can comment down and write your answer. Just a guess. Okay, so let us explore ano nga ba yung mga photosynthetic organisms. Alam nating lahat, it include plants, right? Such as flowers and mosses that typically live on land. But also, meron din tayong tinatawag na photosynthetic protists, katulad ng mga euglena na nakita nyo ngayon sa figure, diatoms, and kelp. which typically live in water. And aside from that, we also have this cyanobacteria. This is a type of bacterium that lives everywhere. And they also consider as photosynthetic, meaning they produced their own food. All right, so let's dig deeper the processes involved during photosynthesis. The remarkable capability of an organism to sequester light energy and use it to drive the synthesis of organic compounds emerge from the intricate organization at the cellular level. Photosynthetic enzymes and other molecules are housed together in a biological membrane, thus allowing the necessary series of chemical reactions to be carried out more efficiently. Let's discover them. Okay, before we go on, let's take a trip back in time. Did you know that the process of photosynthesis most likely evolved from a group of bacteria that have enfolded regions of plasma membrane containing clusters of such molecules? In photosynthetic bacteria that exist today, like the so-called cyanobacteria, enfolded photosynthetic membranes function similarly to the internal membranes of the chloroplast, which is eukaryotic organelle. According to this theory, yung endosymbiotic theory, from a simple bacteria, yung ancestor eukaryotic cell, nagkaroon ng mga enfoldings and engulfing of some organelles, mga photosynthetic prokaryotes na develop yung mitochondria. But when the cell engulf a photosynthetic prokaryote, the so-called chloroplast, this develop a kind of cell which can able to harness energy from the sun and convert it into chemical and then to create its own food. But the question is, where specifically in the plant does photosynthesis takes place? Okay, so let's explore. So to understand more about the process, we must delve deeper on the structure of the chloroplast. Ano nga ba ito mga chloroplast na ito? This is the organelle that can only be found in a plant cell, right? And it is estimated that there are about 500,000 chloroplasts in just a chunk of a leaf with a surface area of 1 millimeter squared. Ganon sila karami. These organelles are found mainly in the cells of the mesophyll, the tissue in the interior of a leaf. So if we're going to cut and zoom sa microscope, makakakita tayo ng mga mesophyll cell. And did you know that inside the mesophyll cell, makakakita tayo ng around 30 to 40 chloroplasts, each measuring about 2 to 4 micrometer by 4 to 7 micrometer in area. Ganon. Sila kadami. Okay? So carbon dioxide enters the leaf and oxygen exists by the way of microscopic pores. Ang tawag doon sa mga microscopic pores na yun ay stomata. Nakikita nyo naman ngayon sa figure. So again, if someone will ask you in the future, how is carbon dioxide and oxygen exchange? It is through the stomata. They are the gatekeepers of the leaf, allowing gas exchange between the leaf and the surrounding air. In addition to this, a chloroplast has an envelope of two membranes surrounding a dense fluid called the stroma. Yung inner and outer membrane sa loob nun ay ang stroma. Suspended within the stroma is a third membrane system made up of sacs called thylakoids, which separates the stroma from the rest of the thylakoid space inside these sacs. In some places, thylakoid sacs are stocked in columns called grana. Ayan, yung grana ngayon. Singular nun ay granum. Ito yung nakikita nyo ngayon sa figure. Chlorophyll, the green pigment that gives leaves their color, resides inside the thylakoid membrane. Remember, makakita tayo ng chlorophyll inside the thylakoid membrane. It is the light energy absorbed by these chlorophyll pigments that drives the synthesis of organic molecules in the chloroplast. So now that we have looked at the sites of photosynthesis in plants, we are now ready to look more closely at the processes of photosynthesis. So the equation of photosynthesis is a deceptively simple summary of a very complex process. The process of photosynthesis can be represented by an equation wherein 6 carbon dioxide and 6 molecules of water will produce sugars and oxygen using energy from the sunlight. So take note on this that the product of photosynthesis, the carbohydrates, contains a lot of more energy than the reactants carbon dioxide and water. Why? It is because electrons that are removed from water are energized by the solar energy before being transferred by carbon dioxide to an enzyme helper called NADPH or NADP+. These electrons are accompanied by hydrogen ions, and that's why hydrogen atoms are apparently transferred during photosynthesis. And this kind of process undergo the so-called redox reaction. Reduction occurs when a molecule gains electron. Remember, reduction occurs when a molecule gains electron and hydrogen ions, and the molecule is said to be reduced. In the equation, as you can see here, carbon dioxide is reduced when it becomes carbohydrates. Oxidation, on the other hand, occurs when a molecule gives up electron and hydrogen ions, and the molecule is said to be oxidized. Again, oxidation occurs when a molecule gives energy or electron, and hydrogen ions, and the molecule is said to be oxidized. So here in our equation, water is oxidized to form oxygen. In a cell, reduction reactions are often coupled with oxidation reactions. Collectively, these coupled reactions are commonly called redox reactions. As you can notice here, if you're going to multiply 6H2O by 6, you would get C6H12O6, or the so-called carbohydrates, which is yun yung formula ng glucose. While glucose is often described as the final product of photosynthesis, as we will see, the reduction of carbon dioxide in CO2 produce a molecule called G3P, the glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate. We're going to discover that later on sa mga next nating mga lessons. And these G3P molecules are often combined to form glucose shortly after the photosynthetic reactions. In actuality, remember class that photosynthesis is not just a single process, but two processes, each consisting of multiple steps. These two stages of photosynthesis are known as, first, the light reactions, the photostage of photosynthesis, and the second one is the Calvin cycle, or the light independent reaction, which is the synthesis stage. We all know that photo, which means light, refers to the reactions that capture solar energy, and synthesis refers to the reactions that produce a carbohydrates. As you can see here in the figure, yung light reactions, it happens in the thylakoid membrane, producing oxygen, ATP, yung energy, and the NADPH, another kind of energy. On the other hand, the Calvin cycle happens in the stroma. It uses carbon dioxide, the energy ATP and NADPH to make sugar, or the so-called carbohydrates. Remember that. So here are the events that occur in the thylakoid membrane during the light reactions. Take note on this. First, chlorophyll within the thylakoid membranes absorb solar energy and energize electrons. Next, water is being oxidized, releasing electrons, hydrogen ions, and oxygen. The next one, ATP is produced from ADP and P or PI, which with the help of an electron transport chain. And lastly, NADP, this is an enzyme helper, accepts electrons or being reduced and becomes NADPH. So here are the events that occur in the stroma during the Calvin cycle reactions. First, carbon dioxide is taken by one of the molecules in the cycle, and next, ATP and NADPH from the light reactions reduced carbon dioxide to a carbohydrate, yung G3P na tinatawag. So we're going to explore more of this sa mga next nating lessons. So as a conclusion, photoautotrophs distinguish themselves by producing their own food through the so-called photosynthesis, and members of the plant kingdom are considered to be photoautotrophs. But take note, not all plants produce their own food through photosynthesis, because some members of the family of Rafflesia are very peculiar in a sense that they do not produce their own food and rely solely on its host plant. So I want to challenge you guys. Please do a research on the members of this family Rafflesia and discuss how they survive without actually producing their own food. If you have the guts and if you have the time, kindly share your answers sa ating comment section. Oh, so I guess that's the end of our discussion for today. So if you have any clarifications or questions, as what I'm always saying, please don't hesitate to contact me and ask me directly those questions. And see you in our next video lesson. I hope you learned something. Enjoy the rest of the day. Goodbye, everyone.